Leaders without education create bad habits. Follow me. Let's go. Hello, everybody. This is JJ Hardy with Victory Leadership Coaching. Here on another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge. And today I have as a guest Jessica Kovacs with Bridge to HR. And I'm not going to do any more talking. I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, Jessica.
I'm Jessica. I'm the owner of Bridge to HR. I work with small companies who are looking for employee relations, situations, communication, anything that has to do with laws, compliance. We work with your business to make sure that you are in line and set up for success, as well as the success for your employees. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about your background. What brought you to Bridge to HR?
I've always wanted to own my own business. So this is something that has kind of been ingrained in me since I was in late high school. But just built my career around HR in multiple industries as well as multiple areas of HR. I've been very lucky to have the experience that I have thus far and continuing to grow. I'm big on education. I do have a master's degree in human resources, and communication is education, all those things that, are really important to being successful in HR are key to owning the business. So decided about a year ago to actually take the opportunity to move forward in my goals and my dreams of owning my own business, and HR is my passion. So this is where I started.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, I'm glad you're here. So today we are going to talk about setting and managing expectations. And this is specific to the workplace because I feel like we both have some teachings that we've done and some experience that we have that really centers around this. And so setting and managing expectations, when I think of that, I think of from the very first time that person walks into the door of your company, from that point forward, not only the impression that you give that individual, but also the information to make sure they're successful with the company, the training to make sure they're successful with their job, and the regular communication to make it a place that they want to be and are going to be successful. So, tell us what thoughts you have going into now that I introduced that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important as, an employer, you need to set things up such as your mission statements, your vision statements, and you have to believe in those. Then when you go into hiring your first employee, you need to translate the culture, the expectations really into that job description from the very beginning, because that's your advertisement for your company. That's giving your candidates future hires the information they need to start off with their relationship with you, especially if you're not very well known. This is that first advertisement to say, hey, this is what we believe in, and this is what we're looking for. So you're setting those expectations up right away. You're showing that you believe in that mission statement and the vision. And then, as you said, going into, setting up the expectations from the very first day. When you go into an orientation as a new hire, you need to have an orientation that is set up to provide benefits, policy expectations. As we've spoken in the past about, reviewing the handbook. What are those key factors that an employee needs to understand? Things such as even AI today are really important to address with employees. If you don't set somebody up for success and tell them what your ideas are, here's your, AI is becoming such a huge part of today's everyday for workers. But you as an employer, for example, if you don't have an AI policy set up, they don't know whether you allow it or not. Most likely, they're not going to ask. So setting up that expectation of what that looks like for bringing ideas into your company is exactly why reviewing policies, handbooks, and those expectations are really important.
Oh my gosh, did I ever think we would get to the day where we would have a policy around
I
artificial
know.
intelligence?
I agree. I agree. It's and it's becoming such a big thing. I feel I know AI has been there, and I know these different programs have been developing and kind of trickling in, but I feel like within the last couple months, I feel we've just seen a whirlwind of the changes, and the popularity of using these AI programs in the business. And it is important to have those types of things right up front. I know that's a whole nother discussion, but it does play along with, those expectations. You have to think broad to make sure that you're providing your employees all the facts, whether you think they need to know them or not. You have to provide that.
Yeah, when you first come into I've worked at a few companies outside of the military, and it seems like when you first get there, it's almost like you have your mouth wide open and you have a fire hose shoved in your mouth. You just get a bunch of it.
A lot.
But it's good. I mean, it's good because, if you're going over the handbook, you're flipping through it, or if it's digital, you're going through it together. And so whether or not, they retain all of that, that's not necessarily the point. The point is you showed them everything. They know where to find the information. Yeah. Now it's time for them to, now that they have the benefits and all the policies out of the way, now it's time for them to learn about their job. But if you don't go over that crucial component, I would hate to work for a company and not understand, what resources or benefits that I have, that I may or may not have access to use. So I think that's important to get out of the way initially. So,
absolutely. I think, when I think of expectations, for employers to your employees, a handbook is that groundwork. That a good handbook is something that is going to set that foundation so that you can always rely back on that. Managers need to rely back on that. So when there are issues, concerns, questions, you can say, hey, it's in the handbook, let's go review it, because you're always driving back to that handbook. And if things change, now we have AI, you add those policies, you update those policies. State, local, even federal, state, and even county and city regulations are changing all the time. So you need to make sure that handbook not only covers what you as a company want, but also what those regulations from the government are as well.
Sure. And another thing that you mentioned in the very beginning, and I guess I did too, but that communication factor in the workplace. How important is that? Not only is communication a pillar or a key principle in leadership, but I'm a career logistician. I worked in transportation logistics management for my whole career, and I have seen things fall apart on the battlefield when people don't communicate well. So, taking that into a regular everyday workplace, I've seen it there too.
Yeah.
When you don't have people telling you what's going on, what needs to be done, what's coming up, and just getting to know you so that they can better understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. If that's not happening, we've all probably worked at a place where we're like, oh my gosh, nobody talks around here. The left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. This is absolutely horrible. So, how important? I would like to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think, the old saying is the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, right? So if you don't communicate and provide proper structured communication, it's really important too to know what to communicate and when. There's there's a line to draw between so much information. You really want your employees to know what's going on, and you want them to see the big picture, and you want them to understand so that they have a buy-in to what you're communicating. But there's also that other side of that line where you have to make sure that you're not over communicating, because some information is too much. It could hurt you as a manager, could hurt you as a business owner, and you have to know that line to draw. And it's tough. I mean, even from the HR perspective, we have to think of the entire picture when we're providing out suggestions to communication. And, it's not always easy, but it's partnering with others, running those, high level communication discussions, around making sure that, you're providing what you need and when.
And some of that, you don't really have to figure out as a first time leader. You know, it's not expected that you just know these things. You're this execution level employee, and then you become a manager or a supervisor, maybe even a director, depending on the company that you're working with. And maybe sometimes you just go straight to business owner. But if you're working in a company, you have so much that you have to learn. So making sure that you leverage your
Absolutely.
peers, and when it comes to expectations, also talking to those people that are senior to you, because you don't understand what the priorities are. Maybe you don't understand what should be talked about and what shouldn't be talked about. And for people that have been in that company for a while, they get it.
Yeah.
And even if you go from company to company to company as a senior person, you kind of know what you can say and what you can't, because you don't want to cause drama with your employees, because if they have all of the information, maybe they feel powerful and they think they can go in there and start using the open door policy for the senior people, and then they're skipping straight over the chain of command, and then it just starts to get really, really bad. And though it's important for people to feel like they have that open door policy, there are certain things that, as a senior guy in a lot of organizations myself, if somebody would have walked straight into my office, I would have been like, wait a minute. Have you talked to your supervisor?
Yeah, and that's something HR is, especially when you have in-house HR, and really even when employees contact me to say, I have questions, it's really important to push back to that leader, that there's first line leader. It's not to get it off of my plate. It's to open and keep that communication between management and the employees, to know that your first step should be going to a manager. Then if there's problems or questions or nobody knows the answer to it, adding in that second layer or that next step person. There are certain things that you go directly above. There's an escalation process, which usually is outlined in a handbook, and is something that you want to drive that. I want people to know that they can come to me as a leader, but at the same time, if I don't want them to come to me for everything, I want them to go through the proper steps and trust the people that are above you, directly above you, to answer those questions.
Sure. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that kind of brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. And, I'm a firm believer that systems beat conversation every single day. So you should be having regular conversations with your people. But that part of that initial, maybe after they get through HR or admin, they should be talking directly to that person that they're going to be working for, because now it's time. That, in my opinion, that's where it should be laid out. Hey, this is me. I'm your first line supervisor. This is who I work for. This is your next in chain. And then kind of laying out the steps that they would have if they had a complaint or anything like that. Though it'll say it in the handbook, it's going to be very general. Usually it's pretty general, but it's the responsibility of that first line supervisor to make sure that they understand, there's a name, and maybe even walking them around the office or the virtual space and setting up meetings so that they understand who these people are. That's just the first step.
Yeah.
That's probably right before you start the job training, and that's only the very first step in your formal communication in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So you actually touched on a few things. I actually, it's important to draw in as well as, you said, showing them around, having that initial conversation. There's multiple things that go along with that. One is welcoming your employee. It's not just about, here's your handbook. It's about building those relationships with not only you as the owner, or if you're not a visible owner, then, the managing team. The manager should be sitting down with these employees. Like you said, what are your expectations as a manager? It's the line of communication. How do they handle if they have a question or a problem? What does their training look like within the first, day, week, month, 30, 60, 90? I mean, it really does kind of expand, because you can't expect them, even the biggest of experts can't just walk into a building and know exactly what to do. Yes, they may be subject matter experts, but they don't know your company. They don't know your systems. They don't know the people around them and who to go to. You need to bridge that, and bridge that gap from, hey, I'm a brand new employee. What do I need to be successful in my job? Introducing to coworkers, because that's going to take a lot of that pressure off of you as a manager as well, because you're helping to build those relationships. Hey, you know what? JJ's your colleague. He's the one that you would go to for learning and development. You need to contact him whenever there's situations. You would come to me as your manager, as, if you have whatever else that may look like. So setting up those lines of communication, providing an outline of what training looks like, providing contact phone numbers, internal and external. Who are the key players in that person's role to be able to be contacted, and in what situation?
Well, and that's setting the stage for that formal communication. But it shouldn't necessarily just be that manager or supervisor, whatever, setting those expectations and integrating them into the workplace. You should also be talking to that new person and asking them, what are your goals in this company? What are your personal goals? I want to make sure that I'm aligning myself with your values, because if we only think of things in reference to how the workplace is operating, if we don't know that person is pursuing a degree outside of the office, or if they have specific things, I've heard people mention, well, my hours are this, and the main goal I have is to make sure that I'm relieving my wife of her duties at 5 o'clock and picking up my kids from daycare. You just really have to know what's going on with your people, and that follows on, because that process never stops. You should communicate consistently and often, and that is about a lot of things. It's about asking them what their plans are this weekend. How are things going? How's your wife? How's your pet? If they don't have any of those, you mean, how's your goldfish? What's going on in your neck of the woods? And then also it should be discussed in that initial counseling, but monthly, quarterly, whatever the schedule is, you should have regular conversations to follow up on that initial conversation. And it should not just be in the normal course of, hey, it's been almost a month. Can you come on into my office today? No, they should know that very first day or whatever, if it's the third day or whatever. Maybe some companies have 3 days where they go through the admin and then they're released to their supervisor. However that looks, sometimes it's the first day because it's just a small company. But after that, now they know they started on October 1st, And on November 1st at 9 a.m., they're not going to their workstation. They're going to be going to your office, or they're going to be looking for you because they know they have another meeting to discuss everything that you just got done talking to. And then continuing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
always. It should be a regular schedule.
Yep. So building a relationship with your employees is it does go further than just, providing a small talk. It's really something that goes a long way, because employees then feel that you care, you're taking that time to invest in them. And, I did a video recently about that relationship and why that's so important. Taking the time to listen. And you said about asking about the goldfish, or those small things that connect. I mean, but it's true. It's you're listening and you're gathering that information. Take a side note, jot down, Goldfish Larry, and he's, loves drinking wine, or whatever the case may be for your employee. Then when you take down and you set that aside, when they do something nice, it may seem silly, but go to the pet store and buy, something for the fish bowl, right?
Right.
And just say, hey, you know what, I was thinking about you today. I think you've done a really great job. I appreciate the things that you've done. Here's something for Larry. I know it seems silly, but it's like one of those things that somebody's going to look at you and be like, wow, did I even mention my goldfish to my leader? Because they're going to forget it, because to them, that's an everyday. For you as a leader, it's something you caught on to, you thought of them and what's important to their life, and you tied that into their performance.
True. Yeah. And, take it one step further. Let's switch that role a little bit. So how many times have you worked for a company where you have somebody walking up to you asking how you're doing, how are things going, whatever, and then moving on, and then maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, coming up to you again, asking you the same question, and then doing that consistently every day, like it's just checking the block. Hey, I got to go through and walk the floor today.
Yeah.
And they don't retain it. They don't actually know who they talked to and who they didn't talk to. They just walk the floor. And when we're busy, one of my jobs I worked at Lowe's, and I had a team of 12 people. And how important was it for me to walk through and talk to these people? It was very important.
Oh, absolutely.
But making sure that you make a mental note of it and remembering these things, because what I noticed is not only will they hope that you remember things, but they might even challenge you. Hey, earlier this morning when I talked to you about that thing, what do you think about that?
Right.
Because maybe they need to be consoled or counseled or, whatever.
Absolutely.
Everyone has a life. Don't be that leader that doesn't care.
Yeah.
Now, on the vein of taking mental note of everything that you talk about, let's go ahead and step that up a notch and say that after a certain amount of time, I would say 60 to 90 days, you should really start focusing on those questions that you've been asking, because you need to start learning what they're good at, what they're not good at, and kind of seeing if you can pair them up with people if need be, maybe even spending additional time with them yourselves, but knowing your employees' strengths and weaknesses. And man, especially if you're a business owner, take mental note of this, because you have the ability to play puppet master. And if those people are not in the role that they should be doing, not the one that you want them to do because that's the job that you need filled, but maybe you have a swap or something like that. If you want to make your team strong, wow, put people where they should be, not where they were hired to be, because your team can be super effective when you really pay attention to your people and learn their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, one way of building that knowledge is setting, even in the beginning, is setting up the goals, and as we're talking expectations from a performance evaluation right from the beginning. Setting up and stating that, in not even in just in a discussion, but even back to orientation, this is the goals of this is how you will be communicated, and this is your expectations around your performance, and how often you are scheduled or planned to meet with your leaders. And what happens is, you then, when they're up and running, and you have this time right in the beginning, you want to do it early, providing out, even if they only have 2 months in the year for the remainder of the year that you're in. What are those goals for the next couple months, giving them that understanding of what you're looking for. And it's okay to say, get familiar with the job, but setting those goals and setting that up right away. Then when you start a new year, or let's say you're halfway or earlier in the year, you're outlining not only business goals, you're outlining specific job goals, and you're allowing them to do their personal goals. There's a lot to a performance evaluation. There's a lot of key pieces that are important to add in to make sure you're hitting all of the right areas, but you're allowing then to have conversations around those goals, not just year end, or not just the beginning of the year when you're setting those goals. You're having consistent check-ins. You're checking in on quarterly. You're checking in on one-on-ones. Your one-on-ones are, so let me back up. Your daily check-ins are, like you stated, you're walking the floor, or you're having a video. In today's world of virtual, it's not always I can just walk up to your desk and say hello. But can you send a quick message and just say, hi, just checking in, how's your day? Or having a quick 15-minute coffee chat, whether it's one-on-one or with your team. I can go into reasons that's really important, but I think we all know where we go with that. Mm-hmm. With that, then you have those one-on-one meetings once a month, and they are important. Yes, we are all very, very busy, but as a leader connecting with your team, it is a responsibility of yours to make sure that your team always knows where they are in their performance. How are they doing? What are they doing well? What are they needing to improve on? What resources do they need? What changes in the goals do you need? Having those consistent conversations, as you have even stated, in this discussion, and many we've had, that's so important. I don't want to have to be going into a quarterly meeting or end of year meeting and finding out that I've been messing up this whole time, but nobody sat down and talked to me. Or I sit down to an HR, have a discussion with HR, finding out that my performance hasn't been up to par, but I've never heard that from my manager. Mm-hmm. Having these opportunities for me to correct that, or for your team to correct that, are imperative for your success as being a leader, and your employees' success in what they do every day for your company.
So you addressed two things there that I'd like to comment on real quick. So you talked about regularity in these conversations, and then you also talked about it could be another call. We could talk about difficult conversations with employees, but that's such a good development topic, because not a lot of people address it. And a lot of people just get fired without even getting the time taken to really help them understand why that's important. But let's go to the regularity. So when I say monthly or quarterly, it's very, very important to make sure those are always on schedule. And you talk about the next scheduled meeting every single time. But all the things you talked about are extremely important, but you don't just address it in the conversation. When you have all those notes from that session every month or quarter, whenever you decide as a manager or business owner, or maybe your company decides for you to have those conversations, you are always addressing the past conversation first, and then moving forward for the current, and then setting goals for the next conversation so that you have structure. You're literally helping each other. But the one component we haven't talked about in that is always making sure you're asking your employees, is there anything else I can be doing to support you better in
Yes.
my role as a manager? It's a very important question to address.
I love that question, to be honest. And I think it's, it doesn't degrade your position in who you are as a leader. Actually, I think it in my opinion amplifies who you are, because you are taking the time to say, what are my needs, or what do I need from you that you're not giving me? Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong as a leader. It just means that our communications are different, and or maybe I'm more of an introvert and I'm not someone to be able to go up to you at any given moment and say. But giving that opportunity also gives you the leverage that if down the road somebody says, well, you never asked me. No, that's not true. I ask you in all of our meetings, what can I do? What kind of resources do you need from the company or to do your job better? What can I do as your leader to support you best?
Yes.
And yeah, so there's a lot that kind of goes along with that specific. So yeah, good call out on that.
Well, the most important part of that question, right, is if as a leader, part of the very definition of it for leadership is that you're supposed to be, the whole goal is to create influence.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
part of creating influence is trust. And then part of creating trust is letting your employees know that you are not perfect. You can always improve. So being vulnerable, I mean, not showing them all of your emotions all the time, because you keep home separate from work, and you keep, when you're upset, separate from the people that are working for you, because that's just how it works. But it's just very, very important to have those vulnerabilities, the minor vulnerabilities to be shown, because they need to know that you're a lot of times people think that they'll walk away from their managers. I've even been guilty of accusing my managers of this at certain times. Oh, they think they're so perfect. Nothing they ever do could ever be wrong. Well, guess what? You don't necessarily walk up to an entire room and say, I'm screwing A, B, C, D, and E up all the time. But no, letting them know that you are aware that you make mistakes, that you're doing your best, but I would like your feedback to know how I can improve.
And showing you're human, right? I mean, that just shows that you also are human, and you're in this role for a reason. As leaders, managers, business owners, it's not everybody is right for that role. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to allow yourself to have those mistakes and, be vulnerable with your team, because it gives them a way of connecting with you as well. Because, hey, you know what? I may put him or her on a pedestal because of the knowledge and the position that they're in. But as an employee, I know that they are a real person, and they don't kind of categorize them in that way. And I think that connection and that relationship is really important. You don't need to have a true friendship with your team, but showing your team that you care is really important.
So look, I transitioned from the military in 2018, and I will say that although I spent 20 years in transportation logistics, when I transitioned and worked in a new job out in the civilian workforce, the language, the processes, everything was different. So I transitioned right out. In my first jobs, I was in leadership roles. And I was never unsuccessful, by the way. I may not have really appreciated some things about the company, or maybe I wasn't comfortable in some of those situations, but that had nothing to do with what my employees saw from me. I was always successful because going into those roles, I leveraged the knowledge of my people I learned, so I managed everything that I was
Absolutely.
supposed to manage, but I leveraged my people to become a subject matter expert because you can't go from one company to another. And I don't care if it's transitioning from the military or if it's just, you want to promote yourself. You want to raise your status in a company, make more money, do better for your family, whatever the case. And you go take another job. Well, JB Hunt is not going to be the same as, I don't know. I threw a company name out there, but I don't have a comparison. But no two companies are
That's
exactly the
correct.
same. They don't do
That's
things
correct.
the same way. So understanding that, especially when you're new to that company and you go in there and you have to build this relationship with your team because they just throw one in your lap. That's what you applied to when you went to that job.
Yep.
You always leverage them. You make sure they know that, I have this experience, but I don't know anything about this company. Help me out so I can help you out.
Absolutely. So, one thing that reminded me of as well is you hire these candidates for a reason because you want to trust their knowledge, you want to trust their experience, you want to bring them into the building to help get you to the next level. If you don't provide them with that trust after they've come in, you're already not setting yourself or the company or him or her up for success.
Yes.
Everybody comes with experience and knowledge and something different than the person before them or after them. Find out from your team what is, what's important to them and what knowledge, ask your team members, is this something that you've experienced before? What do you suggest? It doesn't mean you have to take that suggestion, but you've hired them and you trusted them to be in this position. Allow that trust to help exemplify them into that next step. Giving them it's expected for you to come with ideas because if I had all the answers, I wouldn't need you.
Right.
Right. And that's not the case in anybody's situation. So, really important.
Yeah. And I mean, just kind of a closing comment because we pretty much hit time.
Yeah.
I did talk to somebody who I'll be shooting a podcast with here very quickly. Actually, this afternoon. It'll be for the following week after this one.
Okay.
But he mentioned to me, because I asked him the question. I said, because he was a general manager for a movie chain, movie store chain, which we don't see much of anymore. But he was saying, I asked him the question. So, did you know that you could leverage all of your assistant managers and give them the ability to make decisions at their level? He's like, it took me a couple of years to properly use those people.
Yeah.
I just followed the example I was given, and I really wasn't given a very good example. So how important is it to, kind of eliminate that elephant in the room and just have that conversation? I do trust you.
Yeah.
Make decisions at your level and, execute. And if you have questions, come to me. But I need you to know that I trust you to make decisions. It's important that you make decisions because we are all here as a team, and it's one team, one fight.
Absolutely. Listen, I know we're coming up on time, but you're right. And one thing too is, having a good HR, role model or support is really important because they can too offer those types of, scenarios and make you think outside of the box, but also having mentors and people you trust that you can call and say, listen, these are the issues that I'm having, and asking them their opinion is also invaluable. I mean, you need to always grow as a leader. And, there's always something that comes up. Trust me, from HR perspective, I can say there's always something that comes up. So utilizing that information and knowledge from others is important. It's that piece of the village that'll help you succeed.
So you heard it, everybody. That's Jessica Kovacs from Bridge to HR. If you are tuning in from your car or something like that, just know that at the bottom of my screen, I have it here. If you're watching this video, bridge2hr.com. Learn more about her. Reach out to her if you want to talk to her about HR stuff. And likewise, I'm always here.
Yep.
You'll hear me every week, and if you're watching, you'll see my goofy butt every week. And for me, it's victoryleadershipcoaching.com. I'm not going to run that across because I want to showcase my guests. So, yeah, I appreciate you being on the show, Jessica. And just as a closing comment, is there anything that you want to say to my audience that could be beneficial to you or them?
Yeah, I just think, going in and leadership training, the topics that you bring to the table are really important for growth. And again, it's a way of expanding your knowledge and as a leader being able to, rely on someone. And I think the coachings and the topics you discuss are really important. And I'm a promoter. I think it's really, I love that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that was Setting and Managing Expectations, everybody. Again, this is the Victory Leaders Lounge podcast. I'm here with Jessica Kovacs, and it was a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it, and tune in next week for another great chat.
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Everybody have a good day. Thanks for listening in.